Yeah, I guess let's try it here. Oh, you know why? Because I forgot to parse these. That's why. That's gonna work. Do I have? Oh, right now I don't have any vegetables. Create 1, 2, get them here. That works. I forgot to parse the ID. This is the patch. Yeah, in here.
Oh God, never mind. Yeah, that one sells. I'm already. I don't know, but I still. I want to hear who.
You got why?
Because everything that comes in through the URL is a string.
Yeah. Great. Cool. So let's take a look at how the patch is working. So first of all, it was not working earlier because our get item by type here, get item by ID, we require an ID to be a number because we specify that all our IDs in the inventory are going to be numbers, right? And my problem was that I was passing in the string from the rect.params.id. So that number that I specified /inventory / vegetables /2 was actually, that 2 was a string. And when my get item by ID was using that string 2 as the ID, then of course we wouldn't find it because all the IDs in my inventory are numbers. So what I needed to do there was just parse int the ID, and then that was it. Now the code works. So let's review how this is happening. So we capture the ID that we want to update with the patch request in here in this URL parameter. We get the new details here. In this case, those new details are what we sent in Postman, which is the price and the units. So this is going to be an object with only 2 properties, price and units, and these are the values. Then we parse the ID here. This is the string, let's say 2, if that's the ID that I typed. Now it becomes a number. And then I call my function call inventory.updateItem. I pass in the ID of my item that I want to update. And then let's look at how that is doing it. So in the update item, what we have is, first I grab the item. I grab the item from the array of vegetables, in this case by calling the function that we defined earlier yesterday, get item by ID. So this function, what it's doing is just going to search through whatever type we have, vegetables or bread, and it's going to try to find an element with that ID, right? Now that gets the element, and we have it in item. So this here, sort of like the offload, is part of what this function is doing, which is getting the element by ID. You know, again, the power of functions and breaking down, modularizing our code. We can reuse this function now here. So this function is just going to go into the appropriate array, find the element, return it, and then we have it in here, call it item, right? Let's see, yeah. So we have the item here. So now we have something like this. Let's see if I can. So we have our new details. This is the object that has price. The new price that I specified, I think, was 5.25. And in units, this price, the units are string, I think, just 10. So this is the new details that we send in the request body, right? Then once I found my item, I have an item that is going to be the actual object that has an ID of 2. What other information do we have? An ID of 2, name carrot. Units, 20, type, veg, it's abbreviated, arrived at, something, unit, something, and origin. That is going to be some string. So we have these two objects. So these are the new details that we received from the body of the network request. And then the get item by ID is finding this item. Finding the item that matches the ID that was sent in the URL, right? Now, the way in which this function is working here is if we know that we have these two objects, one is the one that we want to update. What we do is we just iterate over the properties of this object with a for in loop. And now the for in loop, we have for let property in new details. So at some point property, the variable property will be price, and at some other point, or in the next iteration, we're going to have the property be units. So for as many properties as the new detail object has, just make the update. So what happens is on the first iteration, we have property be price. So we're saying price, and and then we say, so property is price, and then we say item dot price, or item add the price key in square brackets here. So remember, in the first iteration, property is price. So here we're saying like item at the price property. So item at the price property, that is, I forgot the price property here. Let's add it here. Price, I think the original price is 1. But we're saying, we're iterating over the keys here, and the first one is price, so that's the first value for property. And then we say item, which is this guy, the property price, which is this one here, be equal on line 96, be equal to the new details at property price. So remember that the property is this one on the first go. So we're saying the item at key price or at property price be equal to the new details at property price. So what that ends up doing is overriding this one and putting this new price in here, in the item. Then the loop goes on to the next iteration, and the for in. And the next iteration, or the next key that we have, is units. And then we repeat the step, which is, so now when property is units, then we say the item at the units property, which is this one, be equal to the new details at the units property. The new details at the units property is 10. What that ends up doing is overriding whatever we had in the item and putting what we had in the new details. So that's basically how the patching works. We're iterating over the properties of the new details, and for each one, updating the item. Questions, or what is something that could go wrong with this?
Key might not be here.
The key might not exist in the item. So what happens if I have something here like organic true? It won't error out.
Will it actually put organic true into the...
Because you're gonna arrive here, property is now organic, and it says item at property organic doesn't exist, let's create it, be equal to whatever new details at key organic, which is true. So it will add it. So that could be some checks that we could do before adding, check that we're not trying to add or update a key that doesn't even exist. This could be some checks that we can do there. So check with your neighbor. I guess, does everyone have this implementation of the update function? What would be another way? What would be another way of implementing this update? Maybe without a for in loop. Yeah. Just writing everything out, right? We could just check. If the new details has a price, then let's update the price. If the new details has a units, let's update the units. What would be the advantage of that? Yes?
It stops it from adding an organic true if you don't want that added.
That's correct. So the slight disadvantage is that we're going to end up with a lot of if statements. But an advantage is that then if the new details has an illegal property, that is not going to be added to our item. Right? Cool. So we have the patch. Now let's verify if it works. So let's get all of them. Oh, what if another edge case? What if I try to update an item that doesn't exist? But let's think about that next. So let's just see that the patch works. So we have this. We have two carrots. Let's say maybe the person made a mistake and forgot to change the name. The name of the second one was not carrot. They just forgot to change that. The name of the second one is spinach or anything else. So that person will make a patch request, postman here, the ID as the last part of the URL, and then this is going to specify the name, spinach. Let's click send. Nice, it changed the name here. Now let's get all the veggies again, and now we have spinach instead of carrots. And the way that is working is the same way, just the new details now has one property name. It's going to only loop once, overriding that.
Can you go back to the patch tab?
The patch tab, yeah. Just updated the name. That's the data that I'm sending in the body of the patch request. Oh yeah, this part will be a sort of a bug. So we have like a property organic that is not part of our vegetable, it is not part of our item. It will add it. True. This is a bug. Oh. I can pollute the data. Yes?
Is that something you could account for on the front end, where you could only add in, if you're dialing a vegetable, brings in a form with only the inputs to update?
Yes, definitely. That's something that you could take care of in the front end. However, you should also take care of it in the back end. Not allow a user to add this. A simple way of like implementing a check could be, we could have all the properties that are valid in an array, and then loop over the array, check if there is one property that is not included in this limited set of properties that we define, then don't allow it or remove it. That could be one way. Cool. So questions about the patch request. So let's say we have test done. We implemented the delete already, right? I mean the function in the inventory, we have a function for deleting an item. Yeah, remove item. So we implemented this function yesterday that is just going to check what type the element is, and is going to loop over that array to find a match by the ID, and wherever it finds the match, it uses splice to remove the element at that index, and I want to remove exactly one element at that index. I saw some other people implemented this with a filter. I think a filter is a really nice way. It makes the code much more shorter. It's still understandable. That's fine too. So, cool. So let me give you some time to implement a route that is going to take in the URL parameter of the item ID you want to remove, and it should be a red handler for the delete request, a delete method request. So let's take some time for that. Remember that you just need to call the function in the inventory to delete the item. What's up?
Okay, so my patch gets me this.
I think you have the same errors that I had before, which I mentioned how to fix. Did you parse the ID?
Let's see. It has to be in the code.
Yeah, in the route handler.
This, right?
Yep.
No, oh wait, no, I didn't see.
Okay, yes, you did. Did you... Wait, show me all your items. Show me all the items that you have in... Okay. Go back to your code. Do you have everything saved? Yeah. Show me then your update item. ID. Because it's saying that this one is null. Maybe let me just check. Go to your Postman. You don't have a space now. Try to update the one ID one. Rename of all, yeah. Your get item, I think. Can you get an item by one ID if you make a get request? That's interesting.
What is here? My arms are tired.
Do you ever see? No, you never see the text. Let's do the console log here. And this should be empty. Maybe that's why. This should be empty because I saved this and the server is supposed to restart and
You check my server out on the terminal? Oh, that's my server.
maybe this has been like that. Okay, so maybe it was. Wait, so you were not running Node mode, that's why. You're not running Node.
Yeah, but the thing is, like.
That's why. So when I was saving, the server was not restarting, was not picking up
Yeah, but
new changes.
the thing is, I can't say no more because whenever I make a new element, a new item, it gets deleted after I save code.
Yeah, and that's unavoidable.
So that means I shouldn't save code while working with Postman for now.
What do you mean save code?
Because when you like command save in Visual Studio Code,
Yeah, Node mode will restart the server.
and delete everything.
It doesn't delete your code, it deletes the data.
Data, yeah, that's right.
That's the problem that databases are coming to solve.
Yeah. So it should work now.
it should work now. Yeah.
Let's check. Node mod server.
So now we should have like an empty here.
Let me create things real quick. But it's gonna be empty as well, so.
Yeah, create some. Yeah, create another tab.
Okay. Yeah, let's use all that.
Here.
The parameters.
Oh, you can save your stuff.
Okay. Is there a quicker way for me? Like name, everything.
But remember it's in here.
Damn.
Yeah, but it's gonna work now.
Sure.
What if you just look at here? Maybe you have a post, a post. Go down, scroll down. Search for a post here. See.
That's awesome. I didn't know you could do that. Okay, so
Yeah, just like that.
send this and make a caret. And now let's see if it works. Okay, that works. Now let's try to patch it.
You want to change the first one to homeless?
Yes, it worked. Now let me get it again. You're right. Cool. Thank you.
It's unique. As long as it's not the same number, it should be fine. So one time I'm thinking no, yours did that. Mine yours did that. I don't know. Everything went back to that's the one we're working on.
No, it works without the last thing. I don't want to do it that way, but I'm trying to do it a certain way.
So we need to get a number.
It might be empty, but it's still empty. But they didn't give an error. Parts of things that way. Well, that's where I'm trying to basically, I'm trying to catch it that already exists on the first before going to the class. So if there's already a name, like I'm going to stop here and then go to the I'm actually catch it. Like what's the name that already exists in the database? So people are supposed to be but I mean the name is missing here. I think it's like it also the thing is yeah, it's really there's no space.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to get
Yeah, we have to find it and then we can delete it. Right. I was studying, well, having a 6 choice. But it's not really working. It's checking. Why it's not checking?
So I could use it right here. That's fine. It's a similar should I go like use it that way. You want to get the first name also. So I can compare it to or not right, but yeah.
How's your view? If you have a function, sort of like what we have here for the animation. Right. That will give us the student if it's already the evaluation.
But you know, this like this I have it like this thing was created.
Hopefully that will definitely help.
I'm not
sure it's going to be
No, it doesn't need to be passed. It's already,
oh, it's
like the student invitation is name.
I see, and then that's you having something called student as the
Yeah, to get the enrollment for the class. It's a little complicated, but it's all tied together with class. Right.
so yeah, a function to get a single student a little bit better. Cool. So how did the delete go? The delete endpoint on the vegetable router. Who did the delete? A few. Okay. Cool. So let's do it here. The heavy lifting is already done in the inventory. The inventory has this wonderful function that we wrote yesterday called remove item. And this function only needs two things to work. It needs the item ID and the type. And also we said that this function will return the item that was removed, or the current item that we call here. So in our router, we could just say router.delete, because this is the type of request that we want to listen for, or the method, /:ID to take in the URL parameter, rec res. So let's parse the ID. ID equal parse int rec.params .id. And then let's create a variable let removed item equal to my inventory. That remove item, I need to pass in the item ID, which I have just as ID, and the type is a vegetable. And then let's do res.json removed item. If our remove item function in the inventory is well written, this should work. A delete request arriving to /inventory/ vegetables /2 or whatever ID of the vegetable we want to remove. So let's try this. On Postman, I'm going to have another request for a delete. I'm going to copy all this stuff, or this URL. So I want to remove, first, let's see what we have in inventory. We have nothing. So let's create two. Carrot, spinach, maybe beets. So now in inventory we have three items: carrot, spinach, and beets. We said that patch worked. Now let's try delete. So I'm going to try to delete the spinach here. So the delete request doesn't need a body, right? We don't need anything to delete the item. We just need the ID for it to identify it. So I'm just going to send a delete request to vegetables, inventory vegetables /2. Click send. Okay, we got the item 2, which is good. Let's see if he removed it. Nice. We now have only item with ID 1 and item with ID 3. So the delete request worked because we had my inventory get items by ID. And in fact, once we get to databases, which we already are, and we're going to continue exploring, we're going to have something very similar to this, like my inventory get item by ID, here. My inventory remove item, for instance, is going to be very similar. In fact, we could just rewrite the remove item to, instead of removing from the array, remove from the database. Or we could also write the add item to add that is currently adding to that array in the inventory class. So instead of add to the array, add to the actual database. So it's pretty exciting because we could leave literally this file as it is and have these items be saved to a database instead of just in memory, which is what we currently have. We'll just need to change the implementation or the code that is in the remove item. We'll need to change the add item to, instead of operating on the array, operate on the database. Add items to the database, update them there, remove them from there. So, congratulations. We implemented all the requests for inventory/vegetable. Then you have to implement those for inventory/bread. But it's good that we saw a full example with one vegetable. We just need to make some adaptations to write the one for bread. So we no longer need this. Cool. So the vegetable import here. Also, I guess in what we should do next is have this hooked up to a front end. Right? So before we jump into the front end, any questions regarding of how we built this, the folder structure? So note that we can show it here. Have some all errors. We have this is our folder structure. We have a server folder. Inside of the server folder, we have a models folder that it's all the models of our data. This dictates what our data is going to look like, what behavior that data has. We have a routes folder where we keep our route handlers, right, for the vegetables route and for the bread route. And then we have app, which is the orchestrator of the entire app. This one is parsing bodies, forwarding. We could think of it as forwarding requests that arrive here to go to the vegetable router, and so on. So questions, comments on this server? Do you guys think this is going to be helpful for the Postgres assignment? Express Postgres assignment? Cool. Cool. So should we jump into the front end? Okay, so let's do the front end. So, and here in my terminal, I'm going to go back to the parent folder. I'm going to go to the client. And I'm going to create 3 files, or 2. I don't think we're going to have time to style it. Touch, let's call it like index.js and index.html. So we created that. Let me just open. Oh, it is here. So now I'm going to close my server folder. Oh, there were some edge case that we didn't take into account, which is what happens if we try to update an item that doesn't exist. Our server is probably going to break because it's not going to find an item to be updated. Some other edge case that we're going to have to live, for instance, is the price should be a floating point number. For instance, here we just have it as a string. The unit should be an integer, right? Those are minor things. For demonstrating purposes, I think this is enough. Here you would just do parse float for the price whenever you're adding a new one. Parse float for the price if you're updating it as well, and so on. Cool, so in here, let's create an HTML form. Type HTML head title inventory management system. That's what I'm going to call this. Inventory management system. We're going to need to import our JavaScript here. Script src JS. Then we have h1 inventory management system. I'm going to create a div for like the bread, the vegetables, and another one for the bread, but we're not going to get to do the bread. This div is just going to have an h2 that says veggies inventory. It's going to have a form. I'm going to fill out next. And it should have a UL for the list. What if we try something? Don't type this. Just pay attention to what I'm typing and ask questions if something doesn't make sense. The code will still be in the repo, so you can reference it there. But I think that would allow us to, one, have a more open discussion, as well as going a little bit faster than typing. Yes? Oh, great point. Thank you. An HTML bug. All this should be in the body. Thank you. Cool. So from here, any questions about this HTML? Cool. So then let's have our document.query selector here, or add the event listener for the DOM. DOM content loaded. The listener. So what do we want to happen? What do we want to happen in once the page loads? Before we do that, let's do console log. I always like to verify, download it. So we have this simple HTML that, according to what I have here, should fire this JavaScript. So let's open the browser. Let's go to, let me just drag this index.html to my browser. Nice, we have that. And this is the console. Download it, cool. What do we want to happen as soon as the page loads? Yes?
You want the form to be filled with inputs that they would want to put in?
Actually, that's a good point. We want a form to show. That is true. Maybe we should do that first. Let's have some input. What are the stuff that we need for vegetables? Let's go to. This is another good point for having like data models. Is that I could just go to my model for the vegetable and then I know all the data that I need. So I'm gonna open the vegetable model here. I know that I need all this, so I'm gonna copy that. Just copy that here. I know that I need input boxes for all of that. Unit and origin. Oh, actually, yeah, just this. ID, name, units, price, unit, and origin. That's all we need. So I'm gonna have one input for. I'm gonna give it a name. ID, oh, actually not ID, name, then another input. Let me just actually copy this one, copy and paste. Another one for units. Let's do price first. Price, unit, then units. Remember that unit is going to be pounds, bags, whatever, and units is going to be the actual number count that we have of those units. Then this is going to be price, and lastly origin. We have price twice, so I'll remove that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's it, right? No. Yeah, and I don't need the ID because the ID is going to be assigned by my backend. So that, lastly, we need the most important input. What's the most important input? Submit. Oh, I forgot to add some types too. I think by default, input types will be type text. Let me add them. Input type text. Let's look at our beautiful form. Lovely. Maybe do we want some? We probably want some placeholders so that the user knows what to type. Let's do some placeholders. Then this is going to be price, or price could be something like 400. Let's just do price. Unit, units, origin. So we have some placeholders there. Refresh. Great. Now it's a little bit more presentable. That's pretty much it. So now we want to do, what we want to do is I type information here. Let's say I want to add a carrot. $1 each. I have 100 or 1,000. No, wait. Did I forget to change one? This is the price, $1. I have pounds, and I have 1,000 pounds. They come from New York. Now, what do I want to do once I hit submit? What should the behavior be? Owen? It's going to refresh. We don't want it to refresh, but more than that, what do we want to do? Brianni? Add it to the inventory in the backend. How do we achieve that? Post request. So basically, we need to make a network request to our backend with this information to be added to the inventory. How do we make a network request on a website? Axios was the other one. Fetch, XML HTTP request will be the third. So we're not going to need to import Axios to do this. Let's get Axios. So first here, if I try to do this, this is going to refresh. My data is gone, and my URL changed with some information there. We don't want that. So let's import Axios. I'm going to go to Axios, the GitHub page. I'm going to get the script tag that they recommend. I think they call it something like script using a CDN. Copy that. Add it to my index HTML before I try to use it. Because this code here, my index.js is going to depend on Axios being present, right? That's why I import Axios first, or I put it at the top before my code. Cool. So now we have Axios. Then, once we know what we need to do, which is making a network request, then we have to think about how to make it. We know that we're going to be doing Axios. Make net request Axios. But then the question is, when do we want to make that request? With what data? What data to what endpoint? So talk to whoever is near you about these questions.
you mean all
Cool. So ideas for when do we want to do that? When do we want to fire this network request? Thank you. When you submit the form. Submit. Cool. What data do we want to send? Let's do the data from the input boxes. Boxes or input fields. To what endpoint? Inventory / vegetables. No, maybe let's do like, has to be a post request. No. Cool. So we have this, then do we know how to have something happen when the form is submitted? Adding an event listener. So to whom do we add that event listener, and what event are we going to be listening for? Cool. So this one, add event listener to form to listen for submit event. Cool. So nice. Let's just do that. So we could do it in a few different ways. Let's have a function called like setup form that is going to add the event listener. So I'm going to create a function setup form that then I'm going to call as soon as the DOM loads. Set up form. What this function will do is exactly what we said here. Add an event listener to the form to listen for the submit event. So how do we grab an element from the DOM? Query selector, what's another way? Element by ID, great. Let's do query selector, document, that query selector. And I didn't give it a form, I didn't give it an ID, so I'm just gonna sort of grab it by the tag name with just form. And then here, I'm gonna pass in the second argument, a callback that is going to be invoked when the form, no, sorry, this is not necessary here. We just get it like that. Query selector. Let's make sure that this works. So I'm gonna just console log the form. So as soon as the DOM loads, we call this function setup form. That function should grab the form and console log it to the console. Let's go to the browser, go to our page, refresh. Cool. We see our form being console logged here. We're seeing the DOM representation of the form, which is fine. We just wanted to verify that this function was running as soon as the DOM was loaded. Nice. Now, how do we add the event listener? Form.add event listener. What's the first argument? The name of the event. We want to listen for the submit. What is the second argument? A callback. And here, VS Code tells me that it's like a listener. And it gives some information. This callback is the function, an ES6 anonymous function that will be invoked whenever this event is fired on the form. Let's do something like, remember that to all these event listeners, to all these callbacks, the browser will pass in the event. So here we get the event here. And then with the event, we can see where the event happened, at what time. We could also prevent the default, which is what we want to do here. Event.prevent default. The event object has the prevent default function method that will prevent it from doing its default behavior. So if we have this correctly, let's do console log form submit happened. And let's try it again. So I have my form. I'm just going to refresh this. I'm going to try to submit. Nice. Form submitted happened. My data will be there if I still have it there. Cool. So as another good thing is that for that submit event to fire, I don't need to click the button submit. With enter, I could do it. I could do it too. You can see that number going up as I hit enter. We could have a button and then listen for a click on the button, but then that will not let you submit the form with an enter. Submitting forms with enter is nice. Cool. So we are able to put some data here. Now instead of console logging, what do we want to do? We should make the network request with Axios to add the item to the inventory. So let's use Axios here. So how do we use Axios again? Axios. That.
Should we park that in a function so that it's separate, or should we put it all in a set of form?
Actually, I think that's a good idea. Let's have a function here. Const create or add vegetable. And we can start to think about if we imagine this is like something that we're going to be doing a lot. We could call this like add item, for instance. And then we'll need some sort of logic to change the URL depending on what item we're adding. If we're adding a vegetable, we want to use that URL. If we're adding a bread, we want to use that URL. Here, I think I'm just going to do it for vegetable only, since we don't have bread at the moment. And then later on, you can like generalize this function. So yeah, so I like this idea of calling add vegetable here. So cool. So with Axios, what does Axios.anything return? Returns promise. Awesome. So what do we know about promises? O'Neill, what do you know about promises?
Promise returns are the JSON file. Sorry, for Axios starting from ours. And for
Okay, who can complement what O'Neill said? O'Neill said Axios will automatically parse the data that you get back. Hubel? Right, yes, we need to wait for the promise to be fulfilled in order to use that data. Otherwise, we saw that JavaScript with the event loop just keeps doing everything else that needs to be done. How can we wait for a promise to resolve? So we saw that Axios, well, so let's do Axios, and we want to send a post request. So instead of Axios.get, we do Axios.post. And then Hubel said Axios.post is going to return to you a promise that we should await. Also, before we do that, we need a URL here. So we're going to need let's say let URL equal http / localhost colon 3000 / inventory / vegetables. Cool. So we have our URL here. Then we can say access that post URL. Let's leave it like that for now. And then we know that, so this is going to return a promise. A promise we don't know how long it's going to take to resolve. We don't know if it's going to fail. So for the first aspect that we don't know how long it's going to take, we need to await, as Hugh also suggested. So that's where the await keyword comes in. Vanille? Correct. So when you do await, you need to make the function asynchronous. Otherwise, the browser or node is going to complain. Async. We do that here. Nice. So this is going to take care of the timing of waiting for the request to come back. Then we also need to take care of if the request fails. For that, we will need to wrap this in a try. In a try statement and a catch for catching the error. For now, we're just going to console log the error in case it happens for us to debug. Cool. Questions up until this point? Making a post request to this URL. Maybe we want to save the response. So let's do let response equal await. Let's console log the response here. So as access.post returns a promise, we await that promise. That promise resolves if successful, and we save the result into something called the response. Cool. I think we are making the network request. From here, we have two parts correct, which is when are we making the network request? We got that nailed down. To what endpoint we're making the network request? We got nailed down. Now we need to think about how to get the data from the input boxes and send it in the post request. But other questions, concerns, or confusion that might reveal this. Okay, so I guess let's see if this is going to make the network request. How could we verify if when I submit the form, a network request is being fired? How can I verify that? Vanille? Okay, cool. We can console log the response here, and the response will be a good indicator of whether the network request happened. Also, an error will be another good indicator of whether the network request happened, right? So if we get any of those, then we know that the network request was made. So let's try it. I'm gonna send this empty and see. Refresh this page, hit submit, and we got a network error. Okay. You know, a network error, when do you know you're trying? When you're failing, right? Network error means we tried to make a network request. Let's see what it says. It says error connection refused. When would the server refuse a connection? When it's not running, right? Actually, this is not the server refusing of connection. This is just, or this is the browser saying I couldn't connect to whatever you told me to connect. That's because I don't have my server running. Nodemon app.js in my case. Oh, but I'm in the wrong folder. cd that nodemon app.js. Oh, server app.js. Cool. We have our server running. Let's try to submit again. A different error. Different errors mean progress. Now this one says access to XML HTTP request at this URL from origin null has been blocked by course policy. No access control allowed origin header. What is this about? Course, our dear friend. Our dear friend course. So remember that course is a policy that was implemented in browsers for websites for controlling websites accessing servers or accessing information from other servers that are not their own, basically. That is that then our server, the server that we currently have, is not reachable from a website. We cannot get information from a website because our server doesn't have course enable. So let's enable course in our server and see that go away. So I'm gonna go to the server, which is in here, server app.js. How do we set up the course? Require course equal require. And then what? So app.use course. Then course is a app level middleware, so I'm going to put it under that comment. App.use course. What course is going to be doing is going to be adding this header that the browser is complaining about. Here, the browser is complaining because the response doesn't have this header set, which is the access control origin header. So that's why the browser is complaining. In fact, I can see the network request here. If we go to the network tab, we can see the network request going out here. This was the previous one that we made that failed, right? Or we thought that it failed. But you see, it gave us a 200 OK. And we can see the response. Well, nothing to preview, so there is no response. Well, actually, we cannot see the response because the browser is preventing us to access that because we don't have that setter. So what course is going to do is just going to, in the response headers, is going to add one called access control allow origin, and then the browser is going to be happy. So let's try that again. Let's refresh this page. Make the network request. Great. We have now no error, and we have an object with data. Oh, look at what we got back. It seems that we created an empty vegetable. It only has arrived at, an ID, and a type. So we enable course in our server. That's great. We're not going to need to touch our server anymore. Let's go to, in the network here, we can see the request going out here. The request is going out to the right endpoint. We see now the header that the browser was complaining about. Now it's present, it doesn't complain anymore. And we can see that this is what we got back. This is the response that we got back. This doesn't look completely foreign, right? We have some of the stuff that we had before. But what is going on here? What do you think? Yes, my server returned this object. In fact, if I go in Postman or maybe in another tab here, and I go to my server to get all the inventory, we see this. We have one item in the inventory, and it has some properties, but it doesn't have them all the ones that we want. Joy? Correct. So basically, I'm just sending an empty post request, not sending any data here. In this post request, not sending any extra data with the request. Right? So to add, you see how we added body to the request with Postman by filling in those fields here? Like if we go to the post request, see how we put this data here? We sort of need to do the same, but with Axios. Put the data in the body, basically. Cool. So to put the data in the body of this post request with Axios, what we need to do is we need to use a second argument to the post. And this, let's call something like, do something like rec body equal this empty object. I'm gonna just send that body, rec body, or data, whatever you want to call this. You call it request body. And in the Axios.post, the first argument has to be the URL. The second argument will be the data that you want to use as your request body. This one. Now, so just having this empty object is not enough. So let's have something here. Let's create maybe, we know that our items are going to have a name. So I'm going to, just to test this, I'm going to hardcode name here papaya. It's one of my favorite fruits. I don't know, is that, no, that's a fruit. That's not a vegetable, so that doesn't count. Which one? I think I would cut out fruits. Broccoli. I don't know how to spell broccoli. This is what it says that the... Like that? Cool. So we just hard-coded this data, broccoli. Now let's see if we can see it going out in the browser. So I'm going to go back to my page, refresh this page, go to console. Also, before we send this back, I'm just going to have here console log the response that data that actually has the data that we get back from the network request. And then I'm hard-coding broccoli, so it doesn't really matter what I type in here. We're going to do that next. I'm going to submit. Wait, did I refresh this? Cool. So I sent that, and we got the same object, just with ID 2. Okay, yeah. So this should make sense in a bit. But let's look at the network request here. This is important. Look at the network request here. Actually, let me send that again. Oh, that's because let's start from scratch. I'm gonna do that network request here. Submit. I have a 204 and then a 200. So we saw that this is the response. We created a new vegetable and it was added. If we look at it here, now I have 4 of some of the other clicks that I did, but they don't have the information that we want. They don't even have this name where we would expect this name to be the name of the vegetable. Now let's look at so in here in the headers tab, this is going to really help you debug network request. The headers tab, you can see all the information, but more importantly, you can see the information that you sent. And here is the information that we sent. We sent this information, and raw, it looks like this. this is what the information we're sending looks like, raw. What kind of information is this? What format? Object, and what do we call more explicitly this? JSON. The JavaScript object notation. That's what JSON stands for. Now, this is what it looks like raw. And a question is, does our server know how to receive JSON data? What is the format of this data that we saw here in Postman code? What is the format of this one? This one is URL encoded. What do we need to do to parse this? Like set up the body parser, basically, which is now built into Express. So for our server to understand this data, we need to set the body parser on Express. And it turns out that for our server, so this data format is different from the one we're seeing in the network request, right? This is URL encoded. In the network request that we see here, this is JSON. So what happens is our server at the moment doesn't know how to parse JSON. It knows how to parse URL encoded. It doesn't know how to parse JSON. But it's not hard to teach our server how to parse JSON. In fact, we just need one line of code for our JSON to work. So actually, if we console log the rec.body in here, the post here, if we console log, let's see, where is that? Here, let me console log here, rec.body. We'll do like post rec.body. And then let's see this console log. I'm going to console log rec.body for the post request. Now let's see that console log when I make the request with Postman. I have the server running here on the left. Now I'm going to send this with Postman. Hit. And we have that. We have the rec.body is this object that was parsed out of the URL encoded string. Right? Now let's repeat the same request or a similar one. Why do I have two VS Codes? With the browser, and let's see what rec.body is. So I'm going to refresh. Oh, I didn't mean to refresh here. Refresh here. And then I submit, and I have that rec.body is an empty object. Even though I'm trying to send the data in here, as we can see it in the network tab, we can see that it has this all the way at the end has this request payload. This is the data that I'm sending. Raw, it looks like this. This is not URL encoded. Our server doesn't know how to parse JSON just yet. That's why the request body is empty. Because the URL encoded middleware is going to parse only data that is URL encoded. Yes? Then you probably have set up the JSON parser. Let's do that just now. So here, I'm going to go to the app.js file, the orchestrator, and I'm going to add another app level middleware. So we added Express, we added URL encoded. The other one we're going to do is app.use express.json. I don't remember if we have to call it. I think so. So going back to the middleware, we can think app level middleware, all the requests and all the responses are going to pass through them. The first one to execute will be the URL encoded. So the URL encoded, what it's going to do is going to check at the request. It sees if the data that's coming in is URL encoded. If it is, it parses it and it saves it into rec.body. In this case, the data that is coming in is not URL encoded, it's JSON. So this URL encoded is not going to do anything. Then the request passes through the Express JSON middleware that is going to check if the request body is coming in the JSON format. If it's coming in the JSON format, it's going to parse it and make it available on rec.body. Then after that, the request passes through CORS. What CORS is doing is just adding that extra header on the response to allow cross-origin. And then it gets to our routes, and then it gets processed with there. So let's repeat now the request and see. And I refresh this page. We're in the network tab. So we're going to be actually looking at this part here. Here we should have now our body, which is going to be the data we sent in the JSON. So let's hit. And now we have, instead of an empty object, we have the data that we sent. So, if only what you need to be aware of here is that the data that you send to a server may be in different formats. It may be on URL encoded format, it may be on JSON, it may actually be just raw binary, for instance. When you're uploading a photo to change your Facebook profile photo, that image is going to be sent not in JSON, not in URL encoded, because that data is not text. That data is binary data that describes a photo of yours. So yeah, just keep in mind that the data that you send to the server may be in different formats. Also know that Axios always sends the data in JSON format. That's a good thing. Axios always sends the data in JSON format. So now we can see here on the network tab that if I scroll all the way down, the request payload, this data that we sent was picked up by the JSON parser that we just set up, and it made it available in the request.body. App.js, I literally just added this line of code. Parse request body in maybe add this comment here. Comment with JSON format. That's what this does. Questions, comments? Douglas.
I've seen new instances show up on the back end of localhost 3000 inventory/vegetables, but they seem empty. There's no. I've got the type automatically set, I've got the arrival timestamp set, I've got the ID set, but it brings up price and units null, and nothing else.
Yeah, so that's because we're still not sending the right information that we need. We're still not sending the name, the price, and all the other stuff. So far, if I go back to my front end, index.js in the client, currently I'm only sending this, which is the second argument to the Axios.post. The documentation for Axios.post is on the GitHub repo if you want to get more details. Here, so yeah, we don't have, if I try to send this with my browser now, in here, I should only get, once I retrieve all this, yeah, I get the item that we just added. We just added an item with name broccoli, but all the other information is missing. Plus, we have hard-coded broccoli. So then, but other questions before we actually get the data from the input fields and just send it. So instead of this being hard-coded here, I just need to grab this name from that input field and all the other information from the input fields. So how would we go about doing that? Actually, let's specify all the properties that we need. We said, oh, hadn't I copied that? I think I had copied that somewhere. All the properties that we needed for, let's go to vegetable. And all this is the information that we need. Oh, I remember it was in the HTML. So basically, name, units, price, unit. Let's do a unit first and then unit second. I said this order here doesn't really matter. Price and then origin. So now you do the grabbing this data from the input fields. How do I grab the data from the input fields? Let's do like 5 minutes to that. Instead of having hard-coded here, broccoli, grab that data from whatever I type in the input field. Yes, Hugo? Yep. Let me just add the comment here.
What's this? You know what that is? Huh? That live chat?
Maybe you have two items. Do you get them done? When you show me all the items, that's clear.
Well, we don't know if I add anything called. That is my maybe we should keep that. Maybe you want to search for add there. Do you remember how to select by a different by attribute name? Because it's in square brackets name we didn't put that to storage. Yeah, that is about but you could, how would you do that? That's true, but somebody that might not be, might want to break the website, not be using JavaScript. They'll probably be using Postman.
Yeah, I guess we could do like, if does not mean this is the,
So yeah, you could first selector equals input in square brackets, name, literal name equal name. The easy way is in like why didn't you make the input section?
The dodge. Especially like running, like instead of like doing activate the screen with your body. The biggest muscles in abs, bars, are the biggest muscles, so you activate cycle the cycle that just does the Lord. It doesn't activate.
I actually added
Some people stop. You ever seen a cycle time? You see how the power so tight and drum. That's how most people run. Or you just run past it.
Some people stop. Because I'm going to change it on this place.
You're-
Wherever it goes, the same. They don't want to run it, so they're going to take that to information and override the old. And then I'll pop out the last. So I use it as kind of reference. Okay, I'll do it anyway first, and then I override the old information.
Brianna, you can refresh. The refresh, you're gonna see that.
Since it's in the array.
So I just pushed the code. I've just pushed the code that we have so far. You can check it here on this repo. It's inside solution, and solution has. Oh, if you forked it over, and you want to download, what you are going to need to do is a little bit more complicated. You need to do git remote add upstream, and then paste the URL of mine. I could do this. No, you should clone it with the HTTP. I could share this on Slack. Upstream equal. Actually, yeah, you guys could do that later. So how do we grab the data from the input fields instead of hard coding it here? Query selector and value. We could have a bunch of variables. Do we want to make those variables? It doesn't really matter. Let's do it. Let's do it here. Document.
It just looks kind of like
Okay, it does look a little bit bad. Yes. So I guess, yeah, maybe let's. Should we have another function like grab data that returns this object basically? Yeah, I guess. Do const grab data. So what this function is going to do is going to start let data with an empty object, and is going to return that data. So basically here our request body, instead of having this, can just do rec body and grab data. Now this is this function's responsibility. So we have a function grab data. What this function is going to do is going to grab all the input fields, put the data in an object, and return that object. So let's do that then. So I'm going to have a variable let name equal query document query selector, and then we want to grab that. And we're basically just going to have a few of these for all of this. We're going to have one for the name, another one for price, unit, units, and origin. Right? Even so, that's a good point. We don't want to parse in the price here or the units, because when they get transferred in the network request, they will still be turned into strings. When this data is traveling like over the wire, over the network, there's just gonna be strings. So even if we parse it, we wouldn't do much. So in here we can grab those elements by ID if we give them an ID to the input fields. Let's do a mix. So I'm gonna grab one by ID. So I'm gonna have let's open the index.html on the side here. So for the name, I'm gonna give this an ID. So I'm gonna say ID equal veg name. So the name, I'm gonna grab it with the ID. So I'm gonna do a hashtag veg name. And let's see if this works. Let's try it small first. So just grabbing the name here. And then I'm going to put all this data into the, I'm going to put all these properties into the data object with name, price. What is the short version for this? Cool, thank you. What if we don't want to repeat ourselves in this? How could we do this?
Can you just put name, comma, price?
Yes. Units, origin. Shorthand. So yeah, we could if you see that you're doing name column name, price column price. If those things have the same name, you could just do it in a shorthand like this: unit, comma, units, comma, origin. Yeah.
Do you have to add dot values into the document dot query selector to get the value of the input?
That's correct. Yes, we need to have. Here I'm gonna need to have that value. What happens if I don't have that value? What would name be? Object, the entire input field object, or the input field node. So let's try this. Let's try this with one, just the name, and then we have this function grab data that is going to get all the data, return this object with all the data inside. Then the add vegetable function is going to call the grab data function, and is going to, whatever the grab data function returns, you're going to put into the rec.body. Then with actions.post, we make that post request to this URL, and we send that data over that body. Cool, so let's try this out in the browser. I'm going to type in here a vegetable called 6.2 class, web class. This is like too small. 6.2 web class, then let's go to the console, I guess. Let me refresh this. 6.2 web class. Hit submit, and we have an error. Failed to execute query selector on document. The provider selector is empty. Oh, these are failing because the provider selectors are empty, so I'm going to have to comment those out. Here, the query selector, the selector are empty. Seems that the browser is going to complain if you try to do that. So that shouldn't prevent me from refresh this, copy that again. Let's try. Price is not defined. On-caught error. L. Then this, I need to comment this out. See, this is why we should do small things first. Should have tried just with name first before trying to go ahead. So got that comment out. Let's try it one more time. Paste this. So we're just gonna send this object with one property, name. Hit submit. We got a response, no errors. We see that it arrived at that time, the ID, and we have the class. So we added a vegetable with this name web class. So that's good. At least, anything that I put here will be sent over. Refresh here, and I think cool. So then we just need to do the same for everything else. For the price, and everything else. So we could just give them an ID to these input fields. That will be okay. Also, we could grab them by something else that is not the ID. We could grab them by name. And this was in the CSS lecture about how to style elements by attribute names and attribute values. So what we could do here, to get those by name, we could say, I want to grab an input, first of all. And then I want to grab an input whose name attribute is equal to name. Actually, let's see if this this will be price, the name price. Let's see if this works just so that before we declare victory. I'm gonna try that in the browser. Let's try to set a price of 100, anything 2, submit. That didn't work, I think. Need to put some quotes here, yeah. So let's do this. You need to put some quotes around the name. But if this is complicated, you could just go with the ID. Let's try again. Anything 3, price of 300, submit. Still not working. Did I reload? I didn't reload. Thank you, Joy. AN4, 400, submit. Price is an object. That is why. Trying to send the entire input. But I'm only interested in the value, AN5, 500. Refresh the page. You guys are getting better than me at this. That's great. Submit. Cool. Price 500. Great. Then we just need to repeat this step for the rest. So what is this doing again? By the name attribute equal to price. Yep. So let's just do the same for this. I should do this, fill in the rest. Fill in the rest yourselves. Fill in the one for unit, for units, and origin. And see if now once you send that request once you hit submit, you actually get the vegetable you want.
I only have 22 submissions, basically. And I was going to go through and grade them all, but I'm like, at this point in time, why give you feedback on something that you just spent, like, looks like you spent like 5 minutes on, right? So, what I wanted to do is give you guys, between now and November 2nd, time to work on your resumes, update them, and send me email submission of them. That way I can grade them and create a grade for you on your professional skills before November 2nd. What? Give us a...
Now that and your how do you say?
King?
Your game, you are planning to do
Did it die?
the same because of my battery.
Sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah.
I always say.
Also, I checked in with some of you about your feedback fair results. Please just go to my calendar and add yourselves. My calendar is public. Anybody can add. You can choose whatever time you want. And once I see it in my inbox, I'll select a room and we'll meet and I'll go over it with you. Just for 15 minutes though, right? And another thing, I'm gonna ask everyone to please shoot me an email about what is your experience with like the Wednesday DSAs. Like I just want to get a sense of how it's going for you specifically, right? And I want to look at how it is like the class trend of how it's going for everybody. Because we got some feedback about that on the feedback there too. So just trying to make it the whole experience better for all of you so that you can do really well on your technical interviews when it comes to your whiteboarding sessions. Does that make sense? Do you agree with me? Okay, that's all. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Oh, and even though you're going to be emailing me, I won't be putting your name in anything. So it's going to be like anonymous. But at least I'll know who's giving me that information. But it's not like I'm going to take your name and your information and share it with anybody else. Got it? All right. Thank you. Bye. Going home sick.
Okay, so how did it go getting the input fields? Easy peasy. So in here, just to get the others, I'm literally going to copy this. C, commands D, paste this. Now this is the unit. This is the units, and this is the origin. That's if I want to grab it like that. If you grabbed it by ID, that's fine too. And then here we have that being packaged sort of in this data object, which then we will send out with Axios here as a second argument. I decided to call this variable reg_body. Doesn't not need to be. I think it's more common just to call it data, something like that. Just know that this is another thing that Axios is really nice at doing. For instance, where here, what we're passing here is the JavaScript object, a JavaScript object in memory. And Axios is taking this object and stringifying it. If we were using fetch or XML HTTP request, we'll need to do that ourselves. We'll need to stringify the object. But here, Axios will see that this is a JavaScript object, you just stringify it. It stringifies it for us automatically, and it's going to send that data to this URL using a post request. So let's see. I'm going to restart my server to sort of start with a clean slate. Nodemon server app.js. Let's get all the inventory, which should be none, empty. Then let's try to actually add something. Refresh this tier 2. Let's try to add broccoli. Price of broccoli says $2.75. I'm not sure if I took care of this decimal points in the backend. We'll see. $2.75. The unit that comes in. What do you call those things where the broccoli comes? A bundle, crown. Crown. How many crowns do we have? Around 20. And they come from Mexico. Let's submit that. Seems that it went well. We got a request body. Oh, seems that we have some empty object here. What was the problem when we saw some empty objects, Douglas?
We have to put the dot value.
The dot value when we're grabbing this here. I'm trying to send the entire input field, which ends up being an empty object. Value, that value, that value. That value there. Let's now look at it again. Broccoli. Oh, I should have refreshed. Broccoli 275. Crown 20. Let's do 30 now. Oh wait, I should restart the server just so that we start with nothing. Let's look back here. We have nothing in the inventory. Let's try to add 30 crowns of broccoli that arrived just now from Mexico. Submit. Cool. Now we have some data here. Let's try to get all the inventory now. Great. Now we have our broccoli being added and kept in the inventory. Let's add something else. Let's add some carrots. Carrots, let's do $5 bags, like to 1 pound bag. We have, let's say we have 25 of those, and they come from Boston. Submit that, and then we added apparently that. Let's go here to check out our inventory, and we have our data showing up. Cool, so this was full stack. From a backend, having some models where we keep the data in storage, to a very simple front end with a form submitting that data with Axios to be saved in the server. Here, you know, a good thing will be sort of having, you know, something like this. And I'm going to change the HTML to have vegetables inventory, something like an H3 here, form. And then here, something like an H3. So something like that, where in here, as we add items, they're going to be appearing here. Should we do that? Should we move on? I guess, let's see. So also, sort of quicker here, we could have, as soon as this loads, as soon as this page loads, what we should do is get all the vegetable inventory to display it here. So let's do that one real quick on our index.js. Now here, I'm going to create a function something like get veg inventory. As soon as the page loads, let's get the vegetables inventory. And then let's display that. So for what are some ideas? What do we need to do if we want to show the vegetables inventory? Hupo. Make a request to the server. So let's do const. What do we call it? Get veg inventory. So this function should make a network request to the server. Actually, you write this function. So here's what it needs to do. Network request to the server. What endpoint to get all the inventory. What endpoint what to do with the data. So write this function that makes a network request to your server to get all the vegetable inventory. What endpoint did we set up for retrieving all that? Yes, you will.
If you install it at the top, wouldn't it just be empty all the time?
What do you mean, like here? Because I'm calling. You're saying would get veg inventory be undefined because I call it at the top?
Well, not undefined, it's just empty.
Somehow when you first start the server, there's nothing in there, and then when you load the page, there's nothing in the server. And then they put it on by
So yeah, the first time, if I haven't restarted my server, but if I restart my server, then the inventory will be empty because that's what we have. But once I add something, and then I refresh my front end, I should start seeing the, yeah. Yes. Yes, this is to do with your server. Your server is not responding.
Yeah, that's fair. But I get some of it, and I get this thing sometimes every time. But is this
Check this endpoint in your server and check with what not responding.
more here, but this is basically
That's correct. So that means that the code that's you leave the feature.
this is second.
That means that this functionality is not related to the feature.
But it comes through in Postman. Like I get this.
So you make, oh, it made it to the request.
Yeah, I get that. Okay,
Wait, try again with access.
that's just
I mean, the browser. The request is here.
also all under wait. Error. Oh yeah, everything is.
Check your network.
Oh, I mean,
Check for which one of these was scroll all the way down. Say that you're not seeing that will be in your access.post. Cool. So what should I type here? Douglas?
You want to start off by putting async for the,
Async. Thank you.
then you want to define URL. So you want to that URL
Okay.
for HTTP localhost 2000 inventory dimensions.
Inventory. Cool. Then?
then you want to try. Open curly brackets. Let response equal await dot axios. Oh, I'm sorry, I said await axios dot get parentheses URL. Then I console log to make sure I was getting, but I don't necessarily think I need to do that. Then I've started building a function to start putting the things into the list.
Sort of this, right? Yeah. Cool. So also with the catch, with the try, you want to catch.
Right.
In fact, if you forget the catch, it's not going to work.
Okay.
No. And you try because it can fail. That's why you try. Then let's console log the error. Console. If anything goes wrong, and maybe let's console log here the response.data. Response.data. Cool. Let's try this. This function seems neat. Go to browser. Refresh the page. Let's see, inspect the network or the console. And so as I inspect the console, we get this empty array. It says that this console log is coming from index.js line 71. Index.js line 71 is our console log. So this is good. This means that we're making a network request. Wait, but we're getting an empty array. That means that then maybe we do have an empty inventory. Let me check. We do. In here. Oh yeah, for some reason the backend was restarted. So let's add some. Broccoli 275, crown 20 units, origin New York. Add that. We added that. Let's make some carrot. Actually, in here now, if I refresh, I should get the thing that what I just added, which is the broccoli. Cool. So as I refresh the page now, because the get veg inventory is being called, as soon as it downloads, then I get the inventory. Is this making sense so far? Cool. Let's add maybe something else. Let's do like carrots. They're at $5. Bags at £1. Units, we have 30 bags. Origin, Boston. Submit that. Then we have that added. If I refresh now, I get that now the inventory is 2 items. Cool. Questions about getting the inventory? What do we want to do next? Hupo? Put them in the HTML, put the inventory, show the inventory, basically. We could have something for showing. We could have, I put a URL that we could just add LIs to. We could also have a table, and then we just add rows, since we know that all the vegetables we're going to have like name, units. We could also present that information as a table and add rows to it. For now, let's just go with the list item. List item, and the information will be like name, price, yeah, maybe a few, not everything. So for that, Douglas, you mentioned about a function you started to work on.
Yeah.
What do you name that function?
It's inappropriate, so we'll make up something else now. Create list.
create list. Oh yeah, so it could be something like, or maybe display veg inventory. Veggies. So this function will receive the inventory, which is an array of vegetable objects. It's going to loop over them, and for each one, it's going to create an li item with the information of that vegetable, and it's just going to add it to the UL. So let's do that then. We saw that the response.data is our inventory. It's an array, in this case, with 2 items. An array with 2 items. So let's just call this function in here. Display that inventory, and let's pass in the response data. So this response.data, that is the array of 2 elements, will be seen by the display veg inventory as veggies, as the array veggies. So then here, let's just do veggies that for each, or we could do it with a regular for loop, that's fine too. For each vegetable, what we want to do is create let li equal document that create element li, then maybe li dot inner text equal to, I'm going to do some string interpolation here, and this is going to be long, so let's do something like veg name first, name followed by, let's say, the units. I'll make the unit first and then the units. So let's just show this information for now. And then append the li to the UL. I don't have the UL. Then let's grab it from the DOM. I have it in the HTML. In the HTML, we have a UL here that is empty. So let's just grab that one. From here, I'm going to do const UL equal document query selector UL, and then just UL dot append child or append li. I think this should be it. So we get the inventory with this function. As soon as we have the inventory, we call the display veg inventory. We give this function the inventory. This function will loop over it, create an li item for every single item. The inner text of that item is a very simple string made out of the name, the unit, and the units. And let's show the price maybe in here too. Maybe we want to show the price prepended by the $. So I'm just concatenating, making up this string that will have the vegetable name, unit, units, and price. Questions about this function? Now we just need to go here, refresh this page, and we should have, oh, damn it. My inventory was gone. Price, 375, crown, 30 New York. So we added that. Let's see it. As I refresh, we have the broccoli. Let's add now the carrot. Price 5 unit bags, each one at £1. We have 30 bags, they come from Boston. We add that. The last part that we need is, well, I need to refresh to see it, but ideally we wouldn't need to refresh. Now we have a list of the vegetable items. As I refresh this page, it's always fetching the inventory that I currently have. I get that in here. This is, again, the power of functions, of modularizing our code. We can think of chunks of code at a time without having to think of the entire piece as a whole. Oh yeah, mine is not adding live either.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, mine is not adding live.
I thought you were right on this. I missed it.
Yeah, mine is not adding live. Also, if I submit twice, it's gonna end up, no, it added 3. That's because I submitted 3 times. Those are some bugs that you could polish. What if we want to add live? So that when I hit submit, not only it adds it to the backend, saves it, but it also adds it to the list. Douglas?
Just trying to find it. You want to call you just want to pull the function again after when you listen to the button. So on the event listener for submit, after add vegetable, you also add.
That's a plausible solution. So what Douglas is suggesting is that as we submit this data, let's fetch all the inventory again. So we could do that. Let's do that first and see why we maybe not want to do that. So basically when we add one here, just not console log it, but also just fetch the inventory. Get veg inventory. So let's see this. This will actually work, I think. Submit. Oh, I forgot to refresh. Very important to refresh. Submit. Nice. So that works. Oh, but I'm getting it double. So it doesn't really work. Because I'm getting every time I send a new thing, broccoli, I'm getting all the inventory again, right? But this is what I had before. So that doesn't really work. Michael?
Maybe in the display for the veg inventory, we can
Here?
No, the bottom.
This one here.
Yeah, we can do UL and then one, two,
Oh, you mean like, okay, yeah, we could. So if we wanted to go with this way, which is just calling the get inventory as we add a new one, yes, then we will need that function to sort of like clear it before, and that's plausible. But the problem with that is that when we add a new item, we're refetching the entire inventory. What happens if we have 1,000 elements and I add one more vegetable to my inventory? I'm going to have to get all of them again. Brianna, you had something. Oh, that is sort of a hacky way of what we're doing here. So Brianna took out the prevent default from the form. What that does is refresh the page and then call in the inventory again. Let's look at that. So she took out the prevent default from here. Oh, for some reason when I save something here, that makes sense. When I save something in my front end, my back end is still resetting. That's because NodeMon, I invoked it from a different place. But let's look at this. Submit. Wait, that didn't work. No, yeah, I don't want this. I should have seen the network request. Oh, right. The inventory is empty. But the refreshing should actually fetch whatever we had in the inventory. Yeah. That's what we were expecting. What's another option? Yeah.
So instead of calling get veg inventory in the add item, just call display veg inventory.
What if we do have a function add veggie to list? That when you add a vegetable, you just call here add veggie to list. If we do it in here.
No, we just call that function in the add veggies. We could just put it like an array.
Yeah, that's
an array of one item.
That's true. So what Michael is suggesting, let's reuse this function that knows how to add stuff to the list. This function knows how to add. It takes in an array of veggies, it loops over them, and it creates a list item for it, adding them to the right list. So what he's saying, let's just use the same function because it knows how to do what we want it to do. And just pass in the newly added veggie here that we have. So let's do let new veggie, we know that this is response data, right? We know that the response.data has the new veggie because that's the way that we set up our server. So what he's saying is let's just call display, what do you call it? Display veg inventory. And then pass in the new veggie, but we need to pass it in an array for it to work. Because the veg inventory, display veg inventory is expecting an array. In this case, new veg is just an object. So we could just pass in, oh wait, what? Oh, I changed my keyboard layout somehow. Just pass it as an array. And then passing that, it's just an array of one element. The loop will work. Veggies that for each, in this case is one, create an li and append it. So let's see, actually I need to put back the prevent default. erase some of this. Let's try this. Submit. Nice. We have it updating live now. Isn't that cool? So what happens is that when we add a new one to the inventory, even if I refresh, so when I refresh, the get veg inventory is being fired, getting all the inventory. Then the display inventory, this display veg inventory takes care of displaying it. And when I add one new one, what happens is that when I add a vegetable, we send it to the backend. We get it back as the new veggie, and we just display veg inventory where we pass in just that single veggie in an array, and that gives us this effect of live updating. Hubel.
So we don't need the get veg inventory anymore?
No, we do need that one. That one is to get the inventory when I refresh the page. Get veg inventory is for getting the inventory when we refresh the page. Or when the page first loads, we want to show what inventory do we have. Questions? A more real example would be not adding that. If we fetch our inventory from here, we should see the same items. See, the last one was broccoli. Refresh. We have our front end getting data from our own backend. You are now full stack web developers. Yeah, that deserves an applause. The last piece that we need in here is just that, the databases that for persisting the data. Just persisting in this data, and then on unit, which is next unit, unit 4. Unit 4, we're just gonna learn React, which is for front end. We're just gonna learn how to do this same HTML in a different way. That is, I think, easier, more organized. But it's literally gonna be the same. That's why we need to have a very strong foundation on HTML and JavaScript. So this, what we call this like vanilla JavaScript, because we're not using any frameworks, we're not using any outside libraries. I guess we're using Axios, but besides this, we're working on a website. We're creating a website with the tools that JavaScript already gives us. Then once we learn React, we'll be doing the same thing, slightly different, but React is just something that is built on top of this. React is like here, and in here under the hood of React is all this query selector stuff and things like that. Yeah. So questions, comments, concerns? What's up, Dante? What are you seeing? What are you seeing? Yeah, share it. Is it from this? Okay.
I'm getting an error when I'm trying to update. I'm trying to figure out, because I thought I mirrored what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
Close, right around when you're, so we're in get, veg
Yep.
We are now
This file grew. Get veg inventory.
we're now at display veg. So we have response. Get veg does that, but then we're also adding to add vegetable. Display veg inventory. Is that how we-
Oh yeah, this one.
Oh, I see. Now that's got to be the variable.
This is so that we can reuse this function. So that we can reuse this function. Oh, yeah.
I did a 4-up, which may be why it's breaking. Because like, if I touch it, it won't display anything. So it is working inside. But when it tries to go again, it says something is not working. That's what the error is. No, that's not where the problem is. So when I try to find it again, I get an error. It's, But I mean, if I get rid of that data,
So I recently get this camera, and I wanna try it out. I got the film. It's like 16 bucks for like 10 shots, like 8 shots, yeah. So I'm gonna try it. Let's try it. It might not work because of it has. No, it doesn't really matter. Because of I bought the film a while back and I haven't used it. I only took like one photo, then I haven't used it, so I don't know.
I get discounts on the film if you need.
You get some of this film? Well, maybe. Let's see. A neighbor was like asked me to help her like remove a lot of trash from her house, and this was one of those.
Trash?
Yeah.
Trash?
Yeah.
$10,000.
No, I looked it up. It's like 50, 60 bucks if you want to get one of these. Yeah. Let's see if it reveals. It's sort of working, but
I'm trying to like.
no, it says you're not supposed to in the instructions. See. So everyone get to this point where they're able to add items to the inventory and show them. Say that again. Burnout? Oh. Yeah, you. So yeah, like. So let's do the patch, let's do the update. Let's do the update and then we can leave there. How should we handle the updating? Michael?
Do you want to use the same form? Or
Let's use the same form.
in that case, then it would be added to vegetable.
Would we need to add what? What would we need to add?
The add vegetable function,
I see.
we have to check if the name already exists within
Mm-hmm. So also, but then actually I don't think we're going to be able to use this exact same function because now we need an ID. We need the ID of the item that we want to update, for instance. So we'll need another input box for specifying like the ID that we want to update. Like, right, that's an issue that we didn't think about, which is at the moment you can add two elements that have the same name, which shouldn't really be allowed. Like I could add two broccolis. So that will be something, where would we, if we want to prevent that from happening, from adding two elements with, or two vegetables with the same name, where would we take care of that? I guess we could do that. On where? The add vegetable, but in the front end or in the back end? Back end. So let's go back to the back end. Let's go to, and where in the back end? In the inventory, because the inventory is the one that is inventory. We could have here the add item here. This add item should try to check first if that Item with that name doesn't already exist. If it exists, like return an error. If it doesn't exist, then let it go through. Here, how could we implement that? How could we check if something already has that name in our inventory? Let's not allow it. And Brianna, we could do.
List that vegetables that includes veggie.name.
I see. That is a good guess. We cannot use that includes because that includes is for simple types, which is like strings and numbers. But now in our inventory, we don't have simple types. We have actual objects. Michael?
Can we do this, right? So in the statement, if this, or like not this, brackets, item details that we need,
Oh, wait, I think you're talking about if the item details doesn't exist? If the item details that name.
like we use the object.
Oh, I see.
Object key brackets. Yeah, we use the object key. Yeah, we put the item details dot name as the object key within the brackets.
Oh, okay. So yeah, what you're suggesting will be a restructuring of how we keep track of the vegetables in this.
Oh, it's in already.
Yeah. I think I just saw you had something. A for in loop. So I think, I think all those are options. Yes, we do need to loop through it. Like if you think about it, like here, this is no different from finding one in an array of numbers, or is no different from finding the word class in an array of words, right? We just have to find an object that has a certain property set, in this case name. So what if we have something like, what if we have another function called, so one is, yes, we need to loop. We need to search through the entire thing. What is the time complexity of that? Of n. We need to look at every single element. What if we have a function, something like get item by name? And then what we do when we try to add an item, we search to see if an item comes up with that name. If an item comes up with that name, then that means that the item already exists. I think, Cameron, this is something that similar problem that you were having.
Yeah.
Cool. So that could be another option. We could have a function, like find item by name or get item by name. Then that is, we just give it the name. That's going to search through the inventory to see if there is an item with that name. If there is, then that will be a truthy. We know that there is something already with that name. We probably just want to update it, or in case we don't want to add that item. If there's already an item with the same name, we don't want to add it, right? So, yes, Cameron.
You could add it, overwrite the old data, and then pop out the last item in the array.
Add it, overwrite the all data, and pop the last item of the array. But what if? Wait, what if it's not the last element?
It's always the last element if you add it to the end.
Right, the last thing that I add will be the last element.
Yeah.
But what if I want to add? Let's say I add broccoli, then carrots, then asparagus. What if I want to try to add? I'm gonna try to add broccoli again.
Okay, so add broccoli again, search through it, minus the last element. When you find another item called broccoli, you overwrite it, then pop up the last one.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think that just does feel a little bit more like more work.
This is 2 lines.
2 lines.
Yeah.
I think we'll need to look at that because it is not feeling as that natural.
I know it's kind of weird, but it's
So here, let's just do this. Yeah, that's another way. Let's do it here. Let's get item by name. Let's do name and type. Then a simple search, basically. Let's do this search with filter. We did it with the previous search that we did was for like get element by ID, right? So it could be basically this exact same search, but now with the name. So since some of you implemented get element by ID with filter, let's try to implement now get element by name with filter. This is another way in which we could have done it. So let's do let filter way. Actually, we could do reduced, but let's do filter. I'm gonna call this filtered inventory. It's equal to this that vegetables. Oh, actually, we want this will be dependent on the type. So if type is equal to triple equal, somebody had a single equal recently. If the type is vegetable, then let's maybe declare this here. Declare this variable here. If the type is vegetable, we know that we want to filter the vegetables array. So we could do this that vegetables that filter. What is the argument that I need to pass to filter? Red. I just want to filter through. Actually, this is like to do. So what is the argument that I need to pass to filter to all the array methods basically? Callback function. That's correct. A function, and that is because filter is a higher order function that takes in another function as is input. So a callback function, and what are the arguments to that callback function? So here I have a callback function. It's just an anonymous ES6 callback function with no arguments. What are the arguments to this callback function? Joanne? What do you think? The arguments to this callback function. What do I put inside of this parenthesis? whatever I'm trying to filter, not exactly. Who can help Joanne? Douglas.
Should it be name from what we're getting in from the passing it to the get?
No. O'Neill. The element. To all the array methods, the first argument to the callback function is the current element the iteration is going through. So here we could call that element, or we could call it veg, just singular. So here we get the veg. Because if you think about it, this filter is just a for loop inside that is leaving everything out that doesn't match the test, or that doesn't pass the test. So in here, we just get the vegetable object, and the filter is iterating and is always changing this vegetable object. Now I want to filter out, then this is going to be filtered inventory equal to this.vegetables.filter veggie, and then here we need to, so we want to filter, or we want to leave out all the items whose name don't match the name that we're adding. So let's do here return veg.name not equal, or actually equal, not equal to name. Filter so wherever the callback to the filter returns true, those elements are going to be kept. Now I don't remember. When you don't remember, you look up the documentation. Alright, so let's see. The callback test each element of the array. Return true to keep the element, false otherwise. So if this ever returns true, okay, so if this ever returns true, then we keep that element. In this case, so this is wrong, we want to do this. Keep the element only if the name of that element matches the name that we passed. So let's try this. Here. So this also enables us to, we could implement another route where instead of the ID, we could get the element by name. We could say inventory slash vegetable slash carrot, and then we'll get the carrot if we want it with this function instead of the ID. So let's see if this works. Then just return. Remember that filter will return an array with the elements that pass the test, basically. What is the test? The test is this, where the names match, where the vegetable name that we had in the inventory matches the name that we passed to this function. So if the element passes this, meaning it returns true for that element, we keep that, and that is kept in the array. So I need to return here filtered inventory at index 0. This is if there is something in the array with the same name, this check will only be true once, and we keep that element. Will only be true once, and we keep that element. That element will be at index 0, so we just return the element if it already exists. So let's see this working once we do add item, for instance. So what we can do then here is, let's do something select already. Let's do let item equal this that get item by name, sort of get item by name. We're gonna need to pass in the name of that item. We have that in item details dot name, and then the type will be just type. And then we can just say if item console log item already exists. And then maybe let's console log the item just to try this out. So the get item by name is going to search the inventory to see if there is an item with the same name of the item that is just trying to be added. And then if there is, let's console log that and return. Don't do anything else. Return, I don't want to add a new item if that item already exists. So let's try that like in Postman. So let's get the inventory. We should have empty inventory. Let's create two things. One beets, another one broccoli. Let's get the inventory. We have two things, beets and broccoli. Let's try to add another broccoli. I'm not going to change that. I'm going to open here this. This is the terminal where the backend is running. And I try to add other broccoli, and it shouldn't add it. Let's see. Cool. So we did. First is we saw that there is no response from server because my function is just returning undefined. And then we see the console log that we saw. Item already exists. Item already exists with this vegetable. Then we didn't run any of the other code because that item already exists. We don't run any of the other code, and then in this way, then we can prevent that from happening. We're now preventing an item being added with the same name. So here you probably respond back with an error message saying item already exists or something like that. But does this make sense of having something like this? Get the item by name. So in here we have item details.name is broccoli, but we already have a broccoli in our inventory. So what get item by name does is it filters out the inventory for anything that doesn't match the name. Anything that doesn't match the name. If there's something that matches that name, that broccoli name, in this case there is, then this will filter inventory at index 0 will be that item, will be that broccoli that we had added earlier. Then here, that is a truthy, so here we're saying if there is an item, basically. If the item is a truthy, then console log the item already exists and quit. We could also say, like, if not item, then do all this other stuff. This is like, check if item of same name already exists. Let's return null if that's the case. So we add the item. Does this make sense? Basically searching first. This is very common. Searching first to see if there's something already with X property the same as the one that is coming in? If there is, then prevent it, because we don't want duplicates. We're going to be doing something similar once we get to databases. For instance, on GitHub, my username is Alejo4373. Nobody else can have that username. If you try to register with that username, GitHub is going to say that username is already taken. Under the hood, in GitHub servers and databases, there is something that is going to check if that username is already taken. If it's taken, then do that. And that could be something like this logic that we have here. So we're returning null here. How could we then, yes? Yeah, so in fact, probably with GitHub's database that is, huge, they probably have all the names stored as, tomorrow we're going to see this, as the primary key. So they have a table where they keep their users. And the primary key for that table, that is going to be a column unique, let's say a column usernames, those are going to be the primary keys and therefore unique. The actual database will check if you're trying to use a primary key that was already used. In this case, a username that was already used, and it's going to prevent you from doing that. Yeah. And that that's true. And so, as you said, yeah. So this table or this column that is a primary key is kept as something like a hash table. You can access it like that. Yeah. Also it's constant. Yeah, like checking if something is already there will be almost constant time. I think we're speculating here because I don't really know how it works, but it happens really fast, right? You could, what you're thinking is, well, if it's linear search, that's going to take a lot of time because who knows how many users they have. So we know that it's not linear search. It could be binary search, or it could be something else, or it could be what I'm suggesting, which is constant time where this is indexed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If we go to the HTML page, add an
That's an interesting point. So now we have our backend is not going to accept a duplicate name for an item. So what Michael is suggesting, if we go back here, we put this name, submit that. Let's try to submit that again. Cool. Now it's prevented. So we probably have the network requests succeeding, as we can see all those network requests happening. They're probably succeeding with a 200. Okay, this is the information I'm sending. This is the response that I'm getting back. Just know. I think in here we should send something more explicit. Say that again. The console cannot read proper name of no. So it's actually breaking. Because it's trying to create an li out of null and it's trying to concatenate the name, the price, and all that. And it says cannot read property name of something that is not an object. No. One last thing here will be we return null here, but we also don't want to. We should return like an object with a message key maybe that says error, duplicate name, something like that, to warn the user that they tried to use a name that was already in the inventory. We could do that in our app if we do, or actually the vegetable router. For the post here, we could just check if this is a truthy, right? If the new veggie was added, then reply back with the new veggie. If it was not, if it's not a truthy, that means it's null. It didn't succeed. Then let's reply back with a message. This will literally be like 2 lines. So if new veggie, just reply with that JSON with the new veggie. Else, rest.json, an object with a message key, error adding veggie. Error adding veggie, maybe duplicate names are not allowed. Because the add item function returns the veggie if it was added, if it was pushed to the inventory array, the appropriate inventory array, and it returns null otherwise. We can do something like that. Now if I go back to the browser, we should probably not reply with a 200, right? Because the request didn't go well. Let's see what the network request will look like here. Network request. So these are the previous ones, and I don't need to refresh this. Save that. 200. Oh, I guess it added that one apparently because of the server didn't really have anything. So let's add the same thing. FG each J. Submit, undefined, undefined, undefined. And if we see here, then we got the error. Adding veggie duplicate names are not allowed. Then in the front end, we'll need to take care of this. We don't really want to show that. But also, we shouldn't be replying with a 200 because 200 is for a success request. What will be a more appropriate HTTP status code, Michael? 400, what does 400 mean? Bad request? There is actually one for this purpose. HTTP status codes. There's one for duplicate, I think. I see it in my search results, but I don't see it highlighted. It's one of these. Maybe conflict could be one. Which one? Oh. Yeah, no, but it should highlight it, but I guess we just check. Conflict not acceptable. Could be not acceptable. Not content. Accept or reset. Let's say duplicate HTTP status code. REST HTTP status code for failed validation or invalid duplicate. Oh, so yeah, some people suggest 400 by request. Yeah. Oh, a 409 conflict. Reply with a 409 saying rest.json. Before we do rest.json, rest.status 409. There is a conflict. So it just did rest.status 409. I'm going to push this before we leave, but let's see that 409 code. In the browser, as we go back here, let's refresh this. We don't have any inventory. Let's add one real quick. Actually, let's refresh. We have that one added. FG HJ. Anything here? The network request submit 409. Nice. Conflict. Cool. Rest that status and then invoke the function. So that's it for today. I hope this was helpful. I hope this shines some light onto the assignment. Yes. That's it for today. Yep. Sorry. I'm gonna push this code right now so that you can inspect it.
Can you use the status code to fix the problem of the undefined?
Yeah. Then because
So like if status code not 200.
yeah, in fact, you see that we don't get the undefined anymore
Oh, because it's for
because Access will reject. Access rejects on not success.
catch error.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm meaning to ask you about this unique error I keep finding. So,
We saw this. We saw this today.
Really?
This is about course.
yeah, but I already have course in here. It's kind of a unique little way. When I add the class, it's okay, but when I try to add this,
Oh yeah, I see. But it seems that this you're making a network request to the wrong place. We're
Right.
making a network request to that.
I don't know how to really like make that something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it turns out that on your Axios calls, you have a URL that is not complete.
Right. So how do I complete a parameter basically from inside index.js?
Well, I
Because
think,
I'm targeting classes.
wait, why don't you do? This is the front end.
Yeah, index.js. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you do like HTTP / localhost? That's why you're missing.
Huh. Well, I'm not in the localhost. I'm in. Okay. It's like you mean like this?
Yeah, exactly like this. Yeah, you need the full URL.
Oh. Yeah. It was working before, which is why that's weird.
You must have the ones that are working must have
wait.
the full URL.
Oh wait. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
I was asking for.
I
a
think
lot of
it.
us needed it.
Yeah, I think it felt appreciated. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm still streaming.